Hello. Wow, thank you for this long introduction. I feel very humbled to be here with everyone. And just to give some context, I'm an artist. I'm usually based in Brooklyn. Right now, I'm in Tel Aviv because of the pandemic and various other reasons that also have to do with the current person in government, in the US government. And I'm not an expert on political science or a political expert, but I do in my own work. I often kind of think about the ways in which participation and resistance can be activated through artistic engagement. And I'm going to go through two projects and hopefully we'll also, I'm looking forward to hearing everyone and take part in the discussion. So, and I am going to read just because it's easier for me. My work from the past years have been shaped through my own relationship to spaces in which hegemonic power is rendered visible. I questions how the sites or technologies which I research and film manifest and represent structural or direct violence and inequality, and how these are tied to histories of settler colonialism and ethno-racial supremacy. The crisis of Western democracy, which is exacerbated during the pandemic, forces us to look deep into the systems which govern our lives. I personally come from a government that is now moving towards its fourth election cycle in 2 years. But Israel's so-called Jewish democracy has from its outset been built on exclusion, expulsion, and erasure of Palestinians. At this moment, there are over 5 million Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza who live either under Israeli occupation or Israeli control and imprisonment. Those do not include the residents of East Jerusalem who can't vote, and the 1948 Palestinians, also referred to as Israeli Arabs, who are often treated as second-grade citizens. In the US, voter suppression, as we just been discussing, and disenfranchisement of Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities, as well as immigrants and other vulnerable communities, expose the racism undergirding the electoral system. And also, as we heard from previous speakers, we have to ask ourselves, does civic participation in the democratic process of election to those who have access to it mean full agency? And again, I just want to say, everyone who can, please go vote. This does not in any way mean that I want to undermine that right. As we know, but we do, as we know all too well, our own psyche is extremely vulnerable to disinformation, biases, fear, and polarizations. These questions around participation, choice, and manipulation have guided me in my work, The Great Seal from 2017. So this work was created just after I moved to New York from Jerusalem and just before the Trump presidency began. Initially, I was interested in looking at the ways in which the rhetoric around religion, nation, ethno-state, divine intervention, and so forth, operated differently or similarly within the US context. And so I decided to focus on conservative evangelical support for Israel and at a specific strand called Christian Zionism. As a result, I approached one of the biggest pro-Israeli lobbies in the US, Christians United for Israel, or in short, CUFI. CUFI, for those who don't know, mobilizes millions of American evangelical conservatives who view Jewish rule over the land of Israel-Palestine as a precondition for Christ's second coming and the imminent battle of Armageddon, a battle in which Jews will either convert or perish. I wanted to locate US-Israel relations within this specific political framework, one in which religion is politicized and the end-time messianic beliefs and biblical prophecies are driving forces for policymaking. So for 2 years, my friends and I filmed at CUFI's DC summits, and these experiences and footage eventually led to the creation of this work, The Great Seal. The work invites viewers to step on an imagined stage at the annual DC Summit of Christians United for Israel, and to take on the role of keynote speakers. By using presidential teleprompters and karaoke sing-along machines, participants are then invited to perform speeches compiled from those delivered at past CUFI summits. The participants also receive cues via headphones to raise, lower their voices, and change their posture. And throughout this interactive performance, visitors stand on a rug printed with the design for the original Great Seal of the United States, first proposed by Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson in 1776, subsequently rejected by Congress. This image frames America as a new chosen Zion, in which Moses is depicted as looking at the promised land, While Pharaoh and his armies drown in the Red Sea, you see Pharaoh on the right and Moses on the left, and this vagina-looking thing is the burning bush. This symbol draws links to the founding myths of the US and Israel as two so-called chosen nations fighting an eternal enemy in the form of a shape-shifting pharaoh. So I'm going to share a video and I hope, can you hear the sound? Okay. The Great Seal is an interactive installation. The work is activated as the viewer steps on an imagined political arena, imprinted with Thomas Jefferson's rejected design for the Great Seal of the United States. Welcome. Thank you for coming. Please assume your position at the microphone and put on the headphones. Look forward into the teleprompters. Participants begin with a motivating warm-up.
It's an honor to be here.
Then, they take on the role of the keynote speakers at the Washington, D.C. annual summit of the powerful pro-Israeli lobby group Christians United for Israel.
When you go to Capitol Hill, I want you to deliver
one single powerful message.
Raise your voice again.
Say, Israel has the right to the borders established by God, because Messiah is coming.
He's coming to Jerusalem, the city of God. The city of God. To show our support. Let us shout together. We are united for Israel. Ready? Go! We are united for Israel. We are united for Israel. We are
So though this piece looks at a specific political phenomenon, it also asks wider question about the lure of populism and confronts the participants with their own choices. They can stay, resist, linger, remain silent. The work does not exist without their presence. It simply falls asleep. So basically you enter and it kind of wakes up. In many ways, this invisible screen, the teleprompter, which has been shaping the standardization of speech, has become a contested symbol. As Netta Alexander, who's a media scholar, and I claim in a shared paper we're writing about the teleprompter, instead of a memory aid, the teleprompter has come to symbolize the kind of old politics that populist leaders around the world are promising to replace. It is no surprise that Trump has been attacking the use of a teleprompter since the beginning of his presidency. And now very quickly, I want to go to another project, which is an ongoing collaborative project, which also talks about the failures and vulnerabilities of American democracy. At the core of this ongoing collaboration with Alex Strada, this project is titled Fictive Witness. It is a lecture performance series that originated at the Goethe Institute in 2018 in New York. The series uses our film, Save the Presidents, as a point of departure. The film is structured over the course of the day, and the film depicts a field of cracked and decaying presidential monuments and the manual labor that takes place around them. Alex and I see these cracks as fissures of opportunity to unpack oppressed American histories and to politically imagine what else might be possible. We are also interested in these busts as representations of whitewashing of history. For each fictive witness performance, we invite a different speaker to present a layer of narration over this film that relates to themes that lay beneath its surface. So rather than a literal description, these interventions speak to the gap between monumental representation and historical narratives that are all too often forgotten, overlooked. So when we had this live in 2018, we collaborated with legal scholar Kendall Thomas, and with architectural theorist Mabel O. Wilson on the right and philosopher Drusilla Cornell on the left to explore ideas, I mean, in the right and left of the image, to explore ideas including political branding, the colonial histories of property rights, and ethical feminism. And now, in light of the current events, we decided to return to fictive witness this fall with 3 Zoom lecture performances in October, November, and December. The series opened with The Imperial Presidency and Police Power, where sociologist Alex S. Vital and historian Nikhil Paul Singh individually and collectively engage with the histories of policing in the United States and calls for abolition. So I'm going to share a very short clip from Alex S. Vital's. So Alex is narrating the film, basically. It's running, and every time the silent film gets re-narrated and unpacked again and again and again.
We need to completely rethink the scope and intensity of policing. Why have we turned every social problem under the sun over to the police to manage? This represents a kind of profound political failure. Why? Well, because political officials in both political parties have become invested in a kind of bipartisan consensus that in the face of global competition, all they can do is embrace a kind of neoliberal austerity politics in which they subsidize the already most successful people in the economy in hopes that some of their success will trickle down to the rest of us. But this trickle-down economics hasn't worked. It hasn't produced a robust, successful middle class. It's produced the highest levels of inequality in the nation's history. And as part of that, it has produced mass homelessness, mass untreated substance abuse and mental health problems, mass participation in black markets of drugs and sex work and stolen goods, failed schools, failed social programs, and a declining social safety net. And then, rather than addressing those problems at their roots, those problems are criminalized. People at the losing end of those arrangements are defined as culturally deviant, morally inadequate, who will only respond to the threats and violence of policing and mass incarceration.
So on November 14th, we will have our next lecture performance with interdisciplinary scholar Noliwe Rooks, whose lecture will center on the histories of educational integration within the public school systems. And she will be joined by Whitney Stevenson from Teens Take Charge to discuss strategies for educational justice. So I'm actually using this as an opportunity to invite everyone who's watching to please join us and have a look at the Goethe Institute's website. And as an artist and as a teacher, I just want to say that the kind of constant work of unpacking, unlearning, and hopefully repairing is a very tedious one. And as a teacher and artist, I do believe in the possibilities of these disciplines to be tools for political engagement and social change, and their ability specifically to generate a space for nuanced discussions and dialogue. And I very much am, again, very happy and honored to be here with everyone and hear all the fascinating talks and from different parts of the globe that we all in many ways share a common issues we are tackling. And I am grateful that we will be able to be in a shared discussion as well. So